Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Grudniblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Genos, originator of the Zero G draft strategy. And in this podcast, Josh, Blake, and I are going to review the insane action from this past weekend and do the free agent frenzy of today. Let's get it. All right. Of course, I have your friend and my best friend, Blake Creamer, here with me. Blake, how are we feeling?
Buddy, this is such an awesome day. I felt like coming into this day, I was sagging a little bit. You know what I mean? It was just the sags of this hockey season here, and then they go and do something like this and totally redeem themselves. Oh my God! Like, what an insane day of moves! I could not even keep up with what was happening. This is going to be a really fun show. I just need to get my thoughts out on these guys and hear what you and Josh think, because I haven't even had a chance to really process a lot of this stuff. It was a nuts day, man. How'd you enjoy today?
Yeah, I was away this whole weekend, so I was just like catching up on the phone, just trying to retweet stuff as it came in. Drove back, we were away at a cottage. Speaking of Josh, he's just trying to connect here. He was running a little bit late. Let's get him in here. Josh, what's going on, man? We just started. How are you feeling? I think his mic's not
Josh
even
is
working.
Oh, there
it is. Oh man, we were just talking about how pumped we were, how the day was going. Yeah, we can hear you, buddy. Can you hear us all right?
Okay. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Seems like he's got a little bit of lag.
There must be. I feel like there's a little bit of a delay going on.
Yeah, that could be. Anyway, let's get into it. Like, let's not waste any time. Let's get into the comments first, actually, because we got comments rolling in already. We got Jackson in here, so ready for the episode. Would love to hear thoughts about the Pens moves or lack thereof, and if they could be a playoff team. I mean, they got Sidney Crosby still, right? Like, I feel like that's probably a good place to start. If any of their ads could be fantasy relevant, what do you think, Blake? Let's talk about the Pens a little bit here. Obviously, they let go of Riley Smith in trade today. They've got their own issues, as evidenced by last year and how that season ended up. But do you think that anything they've done today moves the needle fantasy-wise? Do you see anything shaking out differently in terms of power play or anything going on there? What do you think?
Not really anything they did today, right? Because I mean, what did they do, right? Anthony Beauvillier, thank you for your service. Go fill the water bottles, my man. But Matt Grzelcyk's a nice little piece there, I think, like just a depth defenseman. But I do think the Penguins should be a playoff team because their power play last year was putrid. It was atrocious, right? And that is not normal when you have the player personnel they have on that team. So I think regardless of what they did today, they should still be a playoff team. They've still got guys that can do stuff out there. Crosby's still a legend. And plus they signed the ultimate beefer, Bokonji Imama. Yeah, that guy is a machine. All right. So he's going to be putting fear into a lot of people whenever he's out on the ice. So there you go. That's a nice free agent to signing there.
Yeah, I don't think anything really moves the needle. I mean, Kevin Hayes came over. Like, I don't think that's a big thing.
Oh, right.
Right. Yeah, I just don't know that anything there is truly moving the needle for me. But overall, like, I mean, it's still Sidney Crosby, right? I think that he's still going to drag everybody else along. I think I'm going to be in on Brian Rust probably again. Maybe Rickard Rakell gets extended time on power play 1. Maybe that changes things a little bit. I don't know, but we could definitely see. We could see if they change things up on the top power play. I mean, maybe they go for the Letang Carlson split on top power play. That could happen. Definitely a lot of different ways they could go. We got to keep moving, though. We got to go over to Toronto Dave, 0G. Good to see you, buddy. Jason asks, who's got power play 1 for the Kraken, you think? Yeah, that one's going to be a big one. We'll definitely get to that one. I think for my money, just off the top, I think if you pay Brandon Montour, you're paying him for that role. But that's just my take off the top. And then Captain Quebec says, Quebec? It's not Quebec, it's Quebec. Do you think Vic Arvidsson's stock went up or down fantasy wise? Exposition probably meant exposure there to McDavid, Draisaitl 5-5, and probably no place on power play 1 with Hyman and RNH already there. Yeah, I don't think you can reasonably expect top power play time for any of the Edmonton acquisitions. We'll get there too, but yeah, I think overall it's got to be stock up anytime that even if he plays like 20 games there with McDavid, right? Jackson asking about the Cup winners, the Panthers. Early thoughts on ADP for the Sex Panther. I got to leave that one for you, Blake. How about Montour leaving, Ekblad, power play 1? Quick thoughts on the Panthers.
Yeah, Sex Panther's going to be overdrafted, unfortunately, but what a great signing in real life, man. They got him at massive value, or I think the value that he probably should be at, and not the value that he had last season, right? Like he didn't get paid like a 57 goal scorer, so that's a really nice piece. I think he's probably going to be a third rounder, which I think is going to be a little bit too high for me. Montour leaving, you know what? They had OEL on the power play at the end of the season, so I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a big issue. They obviously won the Stanley Cup. And then Ekblad, that's going to be a really good piece. I think he's going to be the main beneficiary of Montour leaving. OEL is gone as well. We could get the Ekblad that we wanted like 2 seasons ago, where he was getting drafted real high. I think Ekblad is going to be a nice piece this year.
Yeah. We'll get into that one more as well, but I want to get to Jordan. Jordan asked thoughts on the Canucks moves, any needs they still need to fill. I have to leave that one for you, Blake, but I was low-key impressed with what the Canucks did, especially in free agency today. What are your thoughts off the top there?
Yeah, we'll absolutely get into that, Jordan. But I'm really stoked on Jake DeBrusk, like really stoked actually, because he fills a need that they absolutely had, right? He's going to get top 6 power play 1, and he's a metrics guy that we like here, and he's gotten better at the defensive aspect of the game, so I love that. In terms of what they still need to fill, I think we got to get like a better third pairing defenseman here, right? We got Derek Forbort. No, my son is also named Bort. But yeah, we got him. He's a beefer, but you know, we gotta beef up that pairing. I think they could use a second or a third pairing defenseman still. I think they're still in the market for that.
All right. Jason says, what a fun free signing. Happy Canada Day. Happy Canada Day to everybody else out there as well. Jackson says, not the Ekblad we wanted, but the Ekblad we needed.
Exactly.
It might just be that. All right. We've got a ton of stuff to get through here. Josh is trying to reconnect. He had some issues when he was joining and still seems to be persisting, but we will soldier on in his absence. First up, I know, Blake, I think you had a chance to talk through this one a little bit, but I haven't, so I wanted to talk about it. But we're going to go back a little bit before free agency and talk about Jacob Markstrom going to New Jersey for a first-round pick. Yeah, I mean, feels like a decent trade for Calgary, right? They get a pick out of it. I think the relationship there had soured. They were just kind of happy to be out. And New Jersey hopefully gets their solid goaltender of the near future and perhaps the long-term future for a few seasons at least. Overall, I think it's a trade that makes sense, right? The Devils need to solidify something. Markstrom has proven that he can handle volume at the very least and provide at least solid goaltending. He obviously went through stretches last year that were not so solid, but I think everybody agrees a lot of that was due to Calgary. It'll be interesting. Do you have any thoughts about what his ADP might be? I think everybody's going to get high on the Devils again this offseason, going to predict them for a good year. They made a lot of moves, a lot of splashy moves in the offseason here. I think everybody's going to get high on them again. Do you think Markstrom's ADP is going to get chased up?
Yeah, definitely from last season. I mean, he's in a better position here for sure, but I still think it might be all right. We could be seeing this guy, I think, inside 100, right? But maybe it's 90, maybe it's 85. I mean, and I think that's high, obviously, as you know. But I do like the fit, especially with New Jersey, because something Markstrom's really good at is kind of these acrobatic, like out of position saves, you know, and that's something that New Jersey has historically given up, right? They're a rush team, so they get a ton of chances going one way, but they also give up a lot of like high danger chances on the way back, right? And I think that actually might work well for Markstrom. So it's a good trade for them. I mean, Markstrom's a little older, but we know goalies have a little bit of a longer shelf life. So they got their guy, and it's a massive upgrade to what they had last season. I think he's in for a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can agree on that. I think he's probably going to get chased up out of the range where I'm interested as like a zero G option.
Yeah.
So I think I'm probably gonna miss out on having any Markstrom come redraft season, but definitely a spot where you could definitely see the upside case. But also, anytime a goaltender goes to a new situation, like there's always a downside case as well. And I do think that it would behoove fantasy managers to be conscious of that. All right, let's keep moving. Let's talk about Kemper for Dubois. This was a big deal, obviously. Just like it was like basically a
Yeah.
cash dump in both directions somehow, where the both teams were like, oh, we can't pay this guy this much money, and they just exchanged guys. Yeah, I've never been a huge PLD guy, at least for fantasy purposes. He's definitely a better real life player than he is fantasy player when he's on. He is obviously and quite famously or infamously perhaps shown a propensity to just turn the switch off at times and kind of coast. And it seemed like he turned that switch off for a good chunk of last year in LA. So if he can get things going with a new team, like, I don't know, I feel like this has to be a little bit of a wake up call if you're PLD, if you want to, have any sort of personal pride about this. Like, I feel like he's got to come out swinging in Washington. He'll probably get a chance to be the number one center. He might not play with Ovechkin. Like, Strome did seem to have good chemistry, right, with Ovechkin, but I think that PLD is probably going to be the guy who ends up with the most minutes if everything goes to plan there in Washington. What do you think about that one, Blake?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm low key into PLD in this move. I think it's a win-win situation there. Like Kemper goes from a situation in Washington that was just brutal for goalies, a brutal goalie environment, and now he's going to one of the best ones out there, right, in LA. And that was under McClellan, sure, but I mean, Jim Hiller was the assistant, so that environment should still be good for Kemper. So I definitely like him for a zero G option, depending on where his ADP is. I think that's going to be nice value. But in terms of PLD, this guy, what you said is absolutely true. He's a much better player in real life than he is for fantasy. But I think especially last year, the reason for that was he got no opportunity, right? And who knows what the reason is, right? This guy's a known dingus, right? Which, has an effect into, his coaches trusting him to get out there. But, when I dug in a little bit on some deeper statistics like microstats on PLD, this guy actually showed out in some of the top, like he was in the upper echelon in some really interesting features, like scoring chance assists per 60 at 5-on-5. PLD was in the upper echelon of the league. Shot assists per 60. Controlled entries per 60. He was third overall, and I'm just referencing all three zones, Corey Schneider, but he was third overall in that. Controlled entries per 60 in the league. So those are definitely indicators of someone who can create offense, right? The problem was that he didn't have any ice time, and he's a dingus, right? And he didn't have power play one. So long story short, I think if he gets top 6 power play one, we could be looking at a 65-point player here. I think that you could get much later, right? You're not going to have to spend much draft capital to pick up PLD, but obviously he needs a lot of things to go right.
For sure. Hutch, you're back. You want to jump in on the other side of this trade? What do you think about Kemper in LA? We got some goaltender value out of Cam Talbot and then Dave Riddick out of all people at certain points throughout the year last year. Do you see that Kemper could be that guy for us this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone can play goal in LA for the most part. I guess unless your name's Phoenix Copley last year, but
how dare you?
Peterson the year before, so maybe I'm wrong about that. But, Darcy Kemper, I mean, we've seen him do it before behind a good defense in Colorado. He won a cup, so this guy is not incapable. I think Washington just was not incredibly strong in front of him, and he just couldn't get it together last year. So, and I mean, realistically, it's one bad year. Like he's had even the year prior, he had the lion's share of starts in Washington and was actually pretty decent. So I don't really see. I don't hate that for LA. I think they probably could do better. But I mean, they got out of a bad situation with PLD. It was clearly not working there, but I don't know, man. Some of the moves they've made today, Rob Blake giving almost $4 million to Joel Edmondson. I feel like there was another move they made that was a near disaster. But I'll have to look that up again. Sorry for the technical difficulties here, man. I don't know
That's
what the
all
hell's
right.
going on. I popped in. That's what happens when when you're running late and then you just throw all your shit together. There's no time to iron out bugs.
Yeah, that's all right. We're just happy to have you in the fold, buddy. It's a full family pod here tonight, and we love it. All right, I want to run through a few comments before we get to the next one. Jack asked, thoughts on the Sharks and the Blackhawks? Seems like there's some sneaky value on both teams from a fantasy perspective. Yeah, we're definitely going to get there and get into that a little bit more, but I totally agree, especially the Sharks. I'm kind of low-key pumped about the Sharks at this point. At least I think they're going to be fun. I don't know if they're going to be any good, but I think they're going to be fun. From a fantasy perspective. Future Gadget Lab, loving not that the Leafs have to overpay like $3 million for lesser player for everyone in salary cap leagues. Just pick up guys in no tax states, clearly an advantage, Gary said. So yeah, I think I've seen some like rumblings on Twitter that like the Leafs are gonna like talk to the league and like try to make a case that they should have some sort of like give back or something because of the advantage that the Florida teams and stuff have. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but anyway, it does feel bad to be a Leafs fan and see some of the deals that came in today that did not feel terrific in terms of the AAVs. Jackson saying, would love to get chatter on the Blue Jackets. Got a nice reunion there. That's Sean Monahan and Johnny Hockey. Yeah, that's definitely on the docket. And definitely going to cause some ripple effects for that center lineup there. Adam Fantilli and Boone Jenner already there, but will Monahan go straight to line one with Johnny Hockey just because they have some experience together? That could definitely be the case. Big Chillin' Podcast, the squad. Let's go. Absolutely. Thoughts on Jake with Tampa now? That's going to be pretty soon. We're going to get to that one. Binksy's in the chat. Love to see it. Good to see you here again.
Let's get
Binksy.
to biz.
Hope that the Twins are treating you well. Talk to me about the new projections in Nashville. Yeah, that's up at the top of the docket as well because, yeah, everything we knew about this team has to be thrown out the window now. We got to go back to square one. Captain Quebec Cap Crunch in Colorado tells me they won't get any other forwards. Also tells me I'm going to be quite invested in Nikolai Kovalenko this year. Yeah, they're going to have to pull some rabbits out of their hat. I mean, they did get Drouin back on a small deal for one more year, 2.5 mil. So that probably feels pretty good for them. They feel okay with that. But yeah, they're definitely feeling it at this point. Jackson asking, is Logan Thompson a 0G target? Probably. I think there's going to be some sort of split between him and Charlie Lindgren. I don't think Lindgren doing what he did last year will go unnoticed, but Thompson is definitely not a nobody and a guy who's definitely shown he can hold up his end of a tandem before. And JB, lastly, here before we keep rolling, Nashville, Seattle, and Edmonton won the free agent signings by far. Hard to disagree too much just with the sheer volume, at the very least, of impact players that they brought in. Yeah, Seattle is a confusing one for me, but again, we'll get into it. Let's keep rolling. Let's talk about this trade. Linus Ullmark going to the Sens in exchange for actually Boston's original 24 first. Which obviously has already been used. And then the Sens got rid of Korpisalo going back to Boston. So Korpisalo now the backup in Boston. And then Ullmark going to be the starter for the Senators. It'll be interesting. I feel like Ullmark will probably be in that like 8 to 10 range in terms of rounds ADP wise in the upcoming year. I feel like the Senators there's still going to be like a bad taste in people's mouths with the Senators. They might be again a trendy pick to like take a step this year with a new coach and stuff. I don't know. How do you feel, Hutch? Do you feel like the Sens have what it takes to take a step this year and turn Linus Ullmark into value from a fantasy perspective?
Man, I don't know. I thought they had the tools last year. I think there were. I think there were some coaching issues there. I almost wonder if Travis Green and his system is maybe the difference between their success and their failure.
Yeah.
Because I honestly think DJ Smith was such a disaster last year. They waited way too long to fire him. Then they bring in Jacques Martin, and he's just a dinosaur. And I feel like Linus Ullmark, it's interesting though. Like people talk about him regressing significantly, going to a team like Ottawa that doesn't have defense. But you look at his numbers in Buffalo, like he's never had below a 905 save percentage. Is his worst season in Buffalo in 2018-19. But in 2019-20, he had a 915. In 2020-2021, he had a 917 in 20 games. So like he played extremely well under duress with a Buffalo Sabres team that is considerably worse than this Ottawa Senators team on paper. So I mean, I don't hate that ad for them. And I think that he's probably going to succeed a little bit more than people are thinking. I just think he's a really solid goaltender, and honestly will get volume. I heard a rumor that they may bring back Anton Forsberg. But I still see Ullmark as being a guy that probably gets the lion's share of the starts there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. I thought we were going to lose you again for a minute there. Glitched out for a second on my end anyway. But yeah, I think that's a good point to make about the Sens. It's going to be, yeah, just a little bit up in the air. I think that'll keep his ADP from rising too much, but it is definitely a chance for him to be a full-fledged starter and potentially return some value. Let's keep rolling. Let's talk about this trade for a second. Jake Wallman going to San Jose. Blake, talk to me about this one. How do you feel about Wallman now? Like, he provides some pretty solid block numbers in Detroit, and like, I mean, it's still San Jose. Who do they really have on the back end? Do you think that Wallman has a chance for an increased offensive role in San Jose here?
I think we have to assume that, right? Like, who else do they have that can do anything offensively from the back end, right? Like, and first off, I love that you said you're low key into San Jose, because I had a run of podcasts where I was talking about the San Jose Sharks on every podcast, and it wasn't planned. And I think, like you said, it's going to be a really fun team. And I think that, yeah, Wallman can do some stuff, right? I mean, he's never been put in this kind of role, so it's kind of risky bisky if we want to rely on that. Like, oh, Wallman's top power play, great, like let's roll. It's like, no, let's pump the brakes on that, right? Because, you know, San Jose still stinks, right? they're not good. You know, so I mean, that said, like this is a double-digit goal-scoring defenseman, right? He's awesome. So we'll see if he gets upwards of like 22 to 25 minutes and power play one. Yeah, I think we could be looking at like a 40-point Jake Wallman, maybe, with like pretty reasonable, certainly some awesome block numbers, and, you know, maybe some decent power play numbers. But I think that San Jose power play is going to be, it's going to be interesting to watch. I love, and we'll talk about this later, but Tyler Toffoli to the Sharks. What the hell? That was out of left field. And I love that, because that's not like, oh, let's bring in a veteran to, like, you know, insulate these kids. It's like, you actually brought in like a pretty elite shooter to do some stuff, right? So that's an interesting message you're sending to the team. Like, yeah, we're picking up this guy who's like a pretty elite scorer and shooter. So yes, long story short, to me, Jake Wallman, he's probably rosterable, you know, in fantasy drafts, maybe like your 5th D or something like that, and just take a flyer.
Yeah, Kalen Addison did not get qualified either. So that out of the thin crop of defensemen on San Jose that could potentially get power play time, that's one less guy in that group. So you're looking at maybe Henry Thrun and Jake Wallman battling it out for PP1. So
Henry Thrun, that I picked that guy in like 5 best ball teams last year. What the hell? Oh, Henry Thrun, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame. Is that how the saying? I always mess that saying up. I don't know. Henry Thrun.
Well, I'm pretty sure I took Zellweger in more than one, so it's nice. Basically the same thing.
Fair enough, guys. Let's keep rolling. Let's talk about the big trade. Mikhail Sergachev going to Utah for Connor Geeky, solid prospect. JJ Moser, solid back-end D-man, 2025 second and 2024 seventh. This is, to me, pretty exciting for Sergachev. I posted this on Twitter. I was like, how is this not a massive L for Tampa Bay? And I actually got some pushback. What do you guys think? Like, just on a hockey basis, like, this felt like an L for Tampa Bay. Like, I know what they were trying to do with the salary and stuff, but I just feel like this is not the way I would have wanted to do it. How do you guys feel about it?
You go ahead, Josh.
Fair enough. Yeah, I feel like there's a small window for them to win at this point. Their core is, I mean, obviously their core got slightly younger now that they've essentially swapped out Jake Gensel for Steven Stamkos. Yeah. But You've got Victor Hedman on the back end. They just reacquired Ryan McDonough, so that kind of clogs up the left side in Tampa. I mean, you had to offload salary in order to improve. And Sergachev's making $8.5 million. And he's a guy coming off a really serious injury as well. So maybe there's some question marks up in the air about health. I don't know, but I think that ultimately he's ready to lead a team. Like he's ready to be like a top pairing defenseman. He just was never going to get that in Tampa Bay. And I mean, I think he's going to see that time in Utah. I mean, you're talking about Sean Durzi getting re-signed for $6 million per year. That seems a little bit pricey now that we see Sergachev in the fold, potentially getting power play one. Like now, what does Durzi do? Does Durzi get the power play and you just have Sergachev as a minute muncher? I don't know. It'll be interesting going forward, but I think he probably is your best option on that top unit.
Yeah. Sorry, I just have a quick thought on this, Nate. Like, I think that, like, I'm very excited. So I'm definitely surprised about the pushback, but I also like looking at Sergachev as well. Like his big season, 64 points in 79 games in 2022. Like that was bolstered by 27 power play points, right? Which, you know, he was on Tampa Bay. He was on the Tampa Bay power play, which is one of the best power plays, if not the best power play in the entire league. Like perennially, right? So he's going to run into some points there, just feeding it to these units, right? So it's going to be a little bit of a wake-up call for Sergachev, I think, on this team. Like I don't think 64 points is probably coming, maybe 60. Like I'm thinking 55, 60 points with ridiculous periffs. But yeah, I think he's there to run that power play. And I like what you said, Josh. Like he's ready to sort of lead a team and step out. Like this guy's 26 years old, and I love what Utah did. Like that's a ballsy trade, and I was just really into it. I thought, I like that they're swinging for the fences there, and I like the Durzi signing too.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, my point about like the trade itself was just like, well, maybe don't pay Eric Chernak $5.2 million through 2031, and this isn't such a big problem. They got Ryan McDonough at 6.75 for a couple more years at age 35. Like there's a few things that they've done in the past that led them to this moment, and yeah, I just feel like they are kind of eating it a little bit now. Either way, like at least they got something. Hopefully Geeky turns out for them. Otherwise it's going to look even worse. We got a few more comments. Binksy's been in here. Love the faith that put on Hill in Vegas, but definitely looks to be a less solid team in front of him. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what happens this year. Probably Hill gets a few more starts. I did see it didn't make it into my slides here, but it looks like Samsonov went to Vegas just before we got started rolling here. So Samsonov and Hill would be the tandem most likely. Samsonov can definitely take like 40%, 45%. So I do feel like Hill is probably going to get a good chunk, but Samsonov can definitely be a 1B still, I think. Obviously went through a weird stretch last year, but I don't think there's any reason he can't be a 1B. I think he also said Josh's Minute Munchers top 5 new team name in 2024. Love that. JB, who would you rather have on your team, Foegele or Arvidsson? I have to give this one to you, Blake. You love both of these guys.
Arvidsson. You got to do it. I mean, I love McLovin. Don't get me wrong, but I think he's going to get buried in LA, unfortunately. Like he's going to be a third liner, whereas Arvidsson's going to be a second liner, even though they're both going to be power play too. Foegele might not even get power play, but hopefully he does. But I think Arvidsson's going to have more opportunity, and McDavid or Dry. Come on. Oh my God. It sounds amazing. So both
Arvidsson,
good.
Arvidsson's going to eat, man. I'm so stoked for that for Edmonton.
I just traded him in the Dynasty League, Josh. Before this happened, like, what the hell? Come on, man. I could have used that.
All right, let's keep rolling. Another trade. Logan Thompson going to the Capitals. Yeah, that split there with Lindgren. How do you think it's going to hang out there, Hutch? Do you think one has a clear shot to be 1A over the other? Do you think it is a tandem? Do you think Lindgren did enough to like be a starter and Thompson is just insurance? What do you think's going on here?
I think it's almost definitely a tandem. Both guys have been tandem goaltenders almost exclusively. So other than that stretch for Lindgren last year. So I see it being almost an even split unless someone kind of pulls away as a front runner there. You've got the trust in Lindgren because of the way he played last year, but then Logan Thompson, I think, has probably a higher ceiling than Lindgren, and has probably at his best played better. So I see it being about 50-50. I imagine they go with Lindgren first, as maybe someone that they lean a little bit more on, but it could go either way.
Yeah, I could see it being a true Boston situation, 1-for-1
Yeah.
all the way through the season, assuming both guys are playing decently. That would be my best guess at the moment. Casey Middlestat, Blake's favorite player, re-signed 3-year deal in Colorado. What do we think? Like after he has a full off season, everything there in Colorado, do we think that there's ceiling for him? Do we think that he can get power play 1? What's the projection off the top of the dome, Blake, right now for Casey Middlestat in 24-25?
Oh God. Just lights out. Just a lights out season by Casey Middlestat. Yeah, that's his actual name. He's just mid. All right. But yeah, it's a nice spot for him. I mean, with Nichushkin dealing with what he is dealing with, he's going to be out. Like Casey Middlestat's, he's in that mix to get more touches, more minutes, right? He's going to be the second line center there. They've committed to him. Yeah, I think he has a very good chance at getting top power play. Probably should pencil him in for top power play right off the bat. So I think that Casey Middlestat is probably due for like a career high season. And I'm not saying he's going to smash, right? His career high is 59. Like he might be like a 65-point player next year, right? But it's, as always, Nate, it's risky bisky because he doesn't shoot. He doesn't get scoring chances, and he had a massively efficient year last year, like 14.2%. That's the second highest percentage he's had in his career. So that could go down. And if it does, it's going to be donuts for our boy. But he's in a great situation. Colorado's a wagon offensively. And I think now that he knows it's his home for the next 3 years, I'm expecting a career high for Casey Middlestat.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I do think that it's going to be similar to what we saw with Nichushkin and Lehkonen, where they were just kind of trading power play 1 back and forth. I think it's going to be Lehkonen Middlestat this year, who might do a little bit of that this year. I feel like Jonathan Drouin actually has done enough at this point that he's going to get an extended look on the top line, top power play for as long as he can sustain it. And I'm feeling a lot better about it than I was at the beginning of last year, that's for sure. He had a good stretch, came down the stretch hard, like didn't fade out.
Giggity.
All the things that I wasn't expecting to see from Jonathan Drouin this year, I did see. So, yeah, he signed as well 1 year, 2.5 mil back with Colorado. And I think I'm actually probably the most excited about Drouin out of him, Lehkonen, and Middlestat. How would you rank those three, Josh?
No.
Oh man, Lehkonen, Drouin, Middlestat.
Yeah.
I'd probably go Drouin just simply because of he's probably going to play top line, top power play. Then I'd go Lehkonen, then I'd go Middlestat. I don't see Middlestat as a guy that's going to get a lot of power play one time. Lehkonen is a completely different player. He's a guy that can play net front, and I think that's the space that they need on the power play. I just don't see Middlestat as that type of player. I feel like he's going to be on the outside looking in of primo deployment, and he's just going to kind of be there. Obviously like a responsible second line center, and that's something that they need, but I just don't see his production being incredibly high. I mean, I could be totally wrong about that, but that's just my vibe.
Actually, I realize that we're all wrong, and the answer to the question of who will be on power play 1 all year is Ross Colton.
Damn. Yeah, I tried him on Cameo again, but he's ghosting me. This is just abhorrent behavior. All right. What are you doing, Ross Colton? How do you sleep at night?
Oh, man. Binksy agrees with your ranking, Hutch.
Hell yeah.
He also says the hype train.
No.
The hype train's back on the tracks. All right, let's keep going. Another re-signing, Max Domi, close to home here for me and Hutch. 4-year extension, 3.75 mil. How are you feeling, Hutch? What do you think about Domi? Do you think that this indicates that he might play more like wing up higher in the lineup, play with Matthews, showed some chemistry there? Do you think that he gets another look that way?
I think so. I definitely think that that's an option. It at least leaves that option open. I like the number. I had heard that it could be potentially a little bit higher, and that was making me feel nervous, but no, I like him. I mean, this is very non-apples and chinos, but I like the intangibles that he brings, the snarl, and he just sticks up for his teammates. He's a shithead. He gets under the opponent's skin, takes a lot of penalties, but it is what it is. I do like Domi on this roster. I like him at that number. In terms of fantasy value, not really sure that he's going to be a big needle mover. I think he's probably going to be one of those streamer players that you pick up when the Leafs have a good schedule. But I am happy that he's on the roster nonetheless.
Fair enough. Future Gadget Lab thinks the new Power Play 1 guys are Montour, Sergachev, and Hedman. Agree or disagree? Any new Power Play 1 guys? Maybe OEL in Toronto. What are your thoughts there? Like for myself, Montour, Sergachev, Hedman, I tend to agree with those three for sure. Josh, do you think there's any chance that OEL overtakes Morgan Riley on top power play? Obviously did that at times in Florida this year and ran it okay. I don't think it was like gangbusters when he was there. Like it wasn't like he was exceeding expectations necessarily, but yeah, I think that OEL is an interesting piece to at least throw into it, just given the fact that the Leafs have tried to throw a lot of different people on the top power play over Morgan Riley at times throughout his career. So does OEL give you any pause on Riley?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I would need to watch Craig Berube a little bit closer. I know that head coaches aren't necessarily the people that decide on power play deployment, but in St. Louis, we saw like just an endless cycle of very capable power play quarterbacks just being cycled through those power plays. So we saw Justin Falk, Torrey Krug, Scott Perunovich, Colton Parayko last year at times. So like, I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, he's at least an option. And potentially like a capable one, probably the most capable one that we've seen on the Leafs in years, behind Morgan Riley. So I was kind of hoping for something maybe a little bit less old than OEL.
Let's get Klingberg off the schneid. Oh, get the Klingon back in there. Run it back.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, he's healthy, so that's nice. But
it's an improvement over what we did last offseason.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's keep rolling. Let's talk about Patrick Kane re-signing, 1-year deal. I believe it was $4 million there in Detroit. What do you think this does? Like, what are your projections now in terms of how that power play looks and how in terms of how the top lines there look? Like, do you think DeBrincat had a really weird season? Obviously, last year, is it Larkin, DeBrincat, Raymond? Is Kane up there? Raymond getting pushed down? What's the power play look like? Blake, what do you think?
That's hard to say. I mean, I think Raymond really showed out when it mattered the most last year. And I think that goes a long way, right? This guy was clutch down the stretch, scoring game-winning goals, game-tying goals, trying to will his team into the playoffs. Kane, to me, at this point in his career, is more of a supplementary piece. And I'm not that excited about it. And I'm not that excited about what Detroit's done here. Like, you know, that Wallman trade in general, like, what the hell is that? You know, like it doesn't make any sense. They got rid of Wallman, you know, and I can't remember the defenseman they picked up today, but it's like, what, and they basically just lost some money and a second round pick for no reason. I don't understand, but, you know, I do think that DeBrincat's going to have a better season, and hopefully they put him with Kane. I think DeBrincat and Kane play better together, so I'm hoping that's the case. Maybe somebody bumps up with Larkin and Raymond there. I don't know who that would even be at this point, but in terms of power play, like, yeah, Kane's got to be on there. I think it's going to be interesting. Oh, Gustafsson is the player. Yeah, Eric Gustafsson that they signed, and that's going to be an interesting piece, right? Like Eric Gustafsson or Mo Seider on the power play. They got to go to the old mill and get some Seider. I mean, I know we've had this discussion before. It's basically like the same discussion, only Gustafsson's not as good as Gostisbehere was, right? So it's like, are they going to put Eric Gustafsson on that power play? Because if they do, then I'm low-key interested in Eric Gustafsson as a really late round pick for your defense, right? As a power play one guy, because he's shown he can do that. But I don't know. Kane, I'm tempering expectations. I think we're looking at like 60 to 70 points probably this year for Kane. I don't know what the hell the Yzer plan is, but can you let us in on it?
Yeah, I don't think anybody really knows what the Yzer plan is. The Wallman one was crazy. I saw there was a tweet that like multiple teams were like, "Oh yeah, we would have picked him up if they just placed him on waivers. Like we would have taken that contract, no problem."
Yeah, of course.
But Yzerman had to go give away a second round pick to get it done. Like it was just totally bizarre. But yeah, I don't know how excited to get about Kane, but it does seem like he's going to get a lot of play there. I think Raymond was probably a little bit over his skis this past year. here. Talked about him as a guy to sell in Dynasty a little bit ago. And so I think if I'm betting on players, I would bet on Kane to have at least another solid year here with Detroit. I think he'll get a lot of run. They're kind of thin, to be quite honest, especially on the wings. So I think that he's going to get some run. I think Detroit is probably hoping some of their young guys come up. And we'll get to Gustafson. He's got a slide in here as well. But I want to talk about a couple more comments. Jackson asking about the Slavkovsky deal. We're getting to that one for sure. Future Gadget Lab. I was hoping for something less old about Josh's comments about OEL. Yeah, you and me both.
It's distinguished.
I'm going to ask you, will Forsberg go early now given what they did today? Wings trash today, sadly. Yeah, Forsberg in Nashville. Yeah, I mean, obviously he's still like the guy there, but they did definitely add some firepower there. I think Forsberg will go pretty early, especially in your more reactionary leagues, like wherever your leagues are that people just kind of go with whoever scored the most points last year. I think Forsberg gets that, and he also gets a boost from what the Preds did in the free agent signings today. So that'll be pretty interesting. JBS, you think Jeff Skinner hits 30 goals in Edmonton even if he doesn't see any power play time? Yes or no, Josh?
I'm going to go yes. I'm going to say yes. We're looking at a guy that this past year had 24 goals, basically playing on the fourth line for the second half of the year. So, and getting basically like boxed out of the power play in Buffalo. So this is a guy that's super capable. He's going to be playing with Draisaitl probably, or McDavid, either one. And I just feel like he's just a great fit there in Edmonton. So I see him being great 5v5. I don't think he needs a power play.
Fair enough. All right, let's keep rolling. Sam Reinhart. 8-year, $69 million contract, which is super nice. And yeah, it feels like it's just going to be back to business with the Panthers with that power play. Obviously, Reinhart, like the shooting percentage was way out of line, but he does have Barkov feeding him the puck, which is about as good as it gets across the league. It does seem like they figured out a way to make him completely unguardable on that power play, and he totally took advantage. I mentioned it before, like the shooting percentage that this guy had on the power play this year, not even like the highest shooting percentage of his career on the power play. Like he's always been super efficient from that spot on the power play, even going back to his Buffalo days. Baseline expectation, Blake, what do you think? Are we looking at 50 goals again for Reinhart? Is that still in the wheelhouse, or do you think he's below that?
I think it's below. But that's conservative, right? He's shown that he can do this, 57 goals. But again, that it's not just his shooting percentage on the power play. It's his shooting percentage everywhere, right? 24.5%. No. All right. We've got proof of concept here. Andrei Kuzmenko. No, it doesn't work. And I don't see him hitting even over 20% next year. That said, I mean, I think he is probably a point per game player, I think. And like one thing about Reinhart is that not a lot of people talk about because we're talking fantasy, but he's really good defensively too. Like that's how he gets his minutes, right? He's out on he's killing penalties. He had 4 short-handed goals this year. I mean, this guy's a unit, right? But 27 goals in the power play, that's not going to happen again. I think even what we talked about, who's quarterbacking that power play now? Is it Ekblad? Is it Forsling? That's going to change the look. Right. That's going to change how this power play operates. And Reinhart obviously made his bacon, in that bumper spot, just getting open and just smashing one-timers all day long. So I think, I'm not in on Reinhart this year unless it's at value. And I don't even know where value is at this point with this player because of what he just did. Maybe 5th round, 4th round, 5th round Reinhart, maybe 4th round. Maybe I'm starting to look at Reinhart, but I just think he's going to go well before that.
Yeah, I think he's definitely going before that, coming off a 57-goal season. Let's keep rolling. Let's get to Jake Gensel. 7-year deal, AAV $9 million with Tampa Bay. Ostensibly line 1, power play 1. I don't see how he's not with that kind of contract. What do you think? He goes from, obviously Crosby feeding him pucks to Kucherov feeding him pucks with the stint in Carolina in between where he actually did quite well, which was, not always an assured thing. But Jake Gensel, like just a consummate professional top line player and now goes to the line with Kucherov, could honestly continue to see like 21 minutes a night. Tampa Bay plays the hell out of their top guys. Like, I don't think that's changing anytime soon. Do we think that this changes a lot for Gensel's expectations, positively or negatively, Josh?
I don't know. It's interesting. I think he, no matter what, is going to be an above point per game player. He has. I mean, he's shown now that he's been away from Crosby and was extremely productive in Carolina. I think he's proven that he can do the things. I mean, we look at his underlying numbers and they're great no matter what situation he's in. Yeah, I mean, 5v5, this is the best situation he could possibly be in. They've been looking for a solidified player on that left side on that point and Kucherov line for a couple of years now. They've been putting Stamkos up there, but they've been switching in Brandon Hagel and trying other people here and there. You had Barboulay, I think, last year at times. So obviously they're not incredibly comfortable with the people they've been putting in that spot. But I think Guentzel is probably a lock. The power play is interesting. I don't think that we should just assume that Tampa Bay's power play is going to be as dominant as it's been in the past, because I think that Stamkos one-timer on that left side is, I mean, it's part of the reason that there's so much space for everybody else, is because they're trying to take that pass away. You've got the three-headed monster of Hedman, Kucherov, and Stamkos, where they just snap the puck around and you never know who's going to hit a one-timer, because if any of them shoots, like it's going to be an absolute bomb. But now you've got Guentzel, who's a left shot.
Yeah.
Do you play him on that flank? Do you put someone else there and you put Guentzel in front of the net where he seems to eat a little bit more historically? It'll be interesting to see how that affects the way that they convert on that power play.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Gensel shooting the other way. It's not like they have somebody else who could kick over there too. Like Hagel shoots left as well. Yeah, it's definitely going to be a different look for that power play. I mean, I feel like you have Braden Point, you have Nikita Kucherov, you have Victor Hedman, you have Jake Gensel. Like, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Tampa Bay has had like one of the best power plays over the last number of years. Is it going to be at that level once again? I think that's a fair question to ask at this point. What do you think, Blake? You got an upward arrow or a downward arrow for Guentzel based on this landing spot?
I think this is, as Josh said, like, it's a perfect landing spot for this guy. It's one of those situations, it's like a Matthew Tkachuk situation when he goes to Florida. It's like, okay, here are the keys, buddy. Go ahead. Like, yeah, they're into this guy for a bunch of money. He's going to get top line, top power play right off the bat. And I think if we look at what Guentzel was able to do last season when he was with Pittsburgh, again, that Pittsburgh power play is stinky, right? So I think there's positive regression for Guentzel on the power play. This guy only got 5 power play goals last year, which I guess, even just looking at it now, like that's kind of in his wheelhouse. I think he can do a lot more than that. But there's some other pieces that I really like too. Like he had the lowest shooting percentage of his career on the power play last year. Obviously they were terrible. He's a big time shot and chance generator, as we know. Risky Bisky going with a new face in a new place, but I think Guentzel is pretty much a lock. Like, this team is, we know they're offensive. Defensively last year they were terrible, but we don't care about that. We care about offense, and Guentzel's going to get it. Something I like to think about too when I'm looking at these trades is like, who else benefits? Like, who else benefits on Carolina now that Guentzel's gone, right? Like, and I started to think about that, and I'm thinking about players like Andrei Svechnikov, who's probably like, he's going to be guaranteed top line, top power play at this point. He has to be, right? Players like Seth Jarvis, right? I think this just really solidifies his role in that same vein, right? Line 1, power play 1. So there's some good fantasy pieces that come out of this, but this is a big win for Tampa Bay. I think at this point in their careers, I'd rather have Guentzel than Stamkos, as difficult as that is.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I do think that Carolina's going to have a little bit of a different look. They're definitely going to lean more on that top power play. It should be a little bit better for the top end guys there. Maybe this is the year that RBA doesn't do RBA things, and we don't get the Brind'Amour effect, and we get something out of Andrei Svechnikov that goes above and beyond. Yeah, Svechnikov had a great year for sure, but I do think that there's potential ceiling even beyond this year for him specifically and Seth Jarvis that could be pretty interesting. All right, let's keep rolling. Tyler Bertuzzi signs with Chicago, 4-year deal, 5.5 AAV. Quick thoughts. Do you think this is a clear top line situation? Plays with Bedard at even strength and on the power play? Josh?
I think it's gotta be right. I mean, I'm looking at their other moves though, and it seems like that left side, they've got a lot of options on the left side. They've got looking at cap friendly while it's still available. Bertuzzi, they've got Teuvo Teravainen that they signed, Nick Foligno, Andreas Athanasiou, Ilya Mikheyev, Philip Kurashev that all play left wing. Kurashev can move around to different positions, but you got Lucas Reichel as well, unless they want to play him at center. They have a lot of guys, but I imagine that Bertuzzi is probably the guy you put on Bedard's left to start the year. I think.
Yeah, they do have a lot of guys, as do most teams in the NHL, but they're more aptly described as guys when they're on Chicago. It seems like. Blake,
just some guys playing hockey.
Blake, what do you think? Like, what's your projected top line? Is it Bertuzzi, Bedard, and Kurashev? Taylor Hall's still kicking around there. Teravainen signed today. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's this one's going to be tough, right? Because it's just an influx of players that can all do stuff, right? And they can all play different positions. So we're gonna have to see. I think if I had to guess, definitely Bertuzzi with Bedard. I think that's probably what drew him to Chicago or anyone to Chicago, right? Like you have to play with Bedard. So I think he's going to be top 6 power play 1, Tyler Bertuzzi. So I love that for him and his value. I think there's, a 50 to 60 point player there, definitely more than what he was able to do with the Leafs there, just because he didn't have opportunity. And then it comes down to like, what are they going to do with players like Taylor Hall, Philip Kurashev, Teuvo Teravainen? Like they spent some money on Teravainen. So I feel good about Teravainen in terms of, again, he's going to get top 6. And I think he should be a lock on the power play 1. I'm just looking at Daily Faceoff right now. They have him projected for power play 2. I just don't see that happening, right? When you got a guy that's as good of a power play performer as Teuvo Teravainen, you're going to let him sit on power play 2 away from Bedard. That doesn't make any sense. So I think we'll probably see Kurashev hit down to the second power play there, and maybe they can slow his role a little bit, right? Because Kurashev was a guy who played like 20 minutes a night at points last season, and I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, if I had to guess, I'd go Bertuzzi, Bedard, Teravainen, top line, top power play, book it.
All right, you got it here first. Let's touch on some more comments. JB, I expected more from Chicago with the amount of cap space they had. Good depth pickups, though, I guess. Yeah, I think honestly it's a little bit smart. Like they don't want to go overboard and just burden themselves with some guys just because they have the cap space at this moment. They want to set themselves up for a spot where Bedard is coming into his own as a superstar in the league. You could argue he's already there, but and they're really riding that wave with some good pieces built around him. Jackson said, just trade for Gensel in our Dynasty League. 100-point season loading, boys. And JB also agrees that Gensel will thrive with Kucherov in point. Jackson also wanted to hear Blake's thoughts on Bean with the Flames. Any inside knowledge on a Pinto Bean plus Bean Dream Bean team?
That's about where my knowledge on Jake Bean ends. All right. This is not a player I'm super familiar with, but I mean, when a couple years ago when Columbus was having and even last year when they're just having their injury parade, Bean was the guy they're like, go out and take some power play 1 reps, my man. Oh, dang, you're injured. But I mean, this is a guy that has some ability, like, he had put up a 25-point season with Columbus, like in some decent minutes. So I like when hometown guys go home, right? Like he's playing for Calgary. He's happy to be there. Like it's just a good situation. And Calgary is a team that's rebuilding. So I could see Jake Bean getting a little bit of run there. I mean, nothing crazy, right? And I don't think he's going to be touching power play 1, but yeah, I was really hoping for that Bean to Ottawa so we could reunite the Pinto Bean and Jake Bean. We could make a nice little chili over there.
That would be the most ideal thing to come out of Ottawa in the last couple of years. But let's keep moving. Let's talk about early power play 1 and line 1 thoughts on teams like Boston or the Islanders. So I want to talk about Lindholm in a second here, but the Islanders, they added Anthony Duclair today. Does that change the top line equation for any of you guys? Obviously, Patrick Waugh coming in end of the season has already shaken things up somewhat. But what does that top power play look like? Do you think, Josh? Do you think that this really changes things? Anything they did today, declare, does that go straight to line one, power play one, be there with Barzal? Maybe they finally got a guy who can skate as fast as Barzal, but yeah, does that really
That's
change anything fantasy wise?
That is literally exactly what I was going to say. He's probably the only guy on the roster that can keep up with Barzal. So you probably play them together, I would think, unless they want to spread the speed out through the lineup with their two guys that can skate. But yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised to see him on power play one. I think you've got. I look at a guy like Kyle Palmieri, who hasn't been terribly productive over the last little while. And I could see him slotting into that spot on PP1, but they pretty much rocked with the same five the entire year last year.
Yeah.
I believe it was Dobson, Palmieri, Horvat, Barzal, and I can't remember who the fifth one was.
Nelson.
That's right. Yeah, and I mean Kyle Palmieri is probably the guy that I could see getting bumped there. And Duclair I think would be a great fit.
Fair enough. Let's keep going and talk about Elias Lindholm next up here. 7-year, $54.25 million deal. Have to think that this guy gets some run with Pastrnak on the top line. Really tough projection, I think. I haven't obviously done projections yet, but I think this one's going to be tough to do. How much do you weigh last year with Calgary? How much do you weigh any of the past couple of years with Calgary versus what he did before when he had good line mates and line mates that were producing? Now he's going to play with Pastrnak, who's probably the best player he's ever played with. I think he's going to get a lot of run there. I imagine he'll be a 20-minute a night player for Boston in all situations. So what's the take on Lindholm here, and do you think he's going to get chased up just because of the landing spot?
Yeah, to me, this is maybe controversial. Like, I'm into it, and maybe because I got to watch this guy firsthand, and I've gone at it a little bit on Twitter with a few people just about, like, first off, the contract as it is right now doesn't make a lot of sense. I think you're like, what the hell? How did this man secure 7 by 7.75? That's nuts, right? So definitely looks like a bad contract. Probably is, especially at the end of that contract. But for right now, again, who on the roster there is better than he is at the center position? Like, I don't see anybody, right? I think they'll probably move Zach over to the wing. He's sitting there with Pastrnak, right? And one of the things Lindholm's really good at is puck retrievals in his own zone, carrying it out. Give it to Pasta. What's Pasta good at? Rushing and getting chances off the rush, right? Like, it's going to be awesome at 5-on-5, and he's going to slot right in on power play one with Pasta. So, granted, Lindholm's not an amazing power play performer, but he can do stuff there. I think that for fantasy, it is going to be a risky pick for sure. I don't know that he's going to get chased up. Maybe in like more general leagues, but I think in the leagues that we're playing in, boys, like, I could see people leaving Lindholm out there for a little bit longer, and the longer he stays out there, the more I'm into it, because I really think that this is a player that can get back up to 70 points, 65, 70 points. Elias Lindholm, I'm into that. And it, unfortunately, like, the metrics from last year don't really show that. But I did get to watch this player and his impact in the playoffs for the Canucks. He was the guy they threw out there when they needed something to go right. They needed a spark. They needed a stop, some defensive stops, and to move the puck in transition. And he's really good at that. And again, Pasta is amazing, an elite at rushing the puck and getting chances. So I think it's going to be a big year for this guy. But yeah, I can definitely understand the people that are cautious about this.
Yeah, I have to imagine that we'll see him like in the 6th, 7th round next year, just because people are going to be like, oh, he's there with Pastrnak. He's going to go right back to Calgary days. Like, somebody in your league, one of the 12 in your league, is going to think that and draft him there. Even if you think he should go a little bit later, I think there's just going to be somebody who gets super pumped about him in almost every league. He's probably going to go in that range. It's probably just going to be a little bit too rich for me, but we will see. Let's keep talking about, let's do the big one now. Let's talk about the Nashville Predators setting the world on fire, signing Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Shea. Josh, like, first thoughts, like, is Nashville the Stanley Cup favorite now? What are the betting odds? Has anybody checked?
Oh, I haven't checked, but I don't know if they're Stanley Cup favorites, but I think they've won free agency for this year. It's I can't believe the way that they've pulled players, but I mean Nashville's a great team, and I think this kind of puts them into the contender realm. Having I think this is kind of what they needed. They need a little bit more offense, a little bit more offensive depth, and honestly, like there's no depth like getting two guys that'll play at the top of your lineup, right? Like that's pushing everybody else down. So I don't know, like in terms of deployment for these guys, I don't know how it's going to go. There's a lot of right shots on that. They have the opposite problem of the Tampa Bay Lightning. They've got Philip Forsberg, Steven Stamkos, and Jonathan Marchessault all playing right shots. They're all almost definitely playing on PP1. So it'll be interesting to see how they deploy them. I imagine Stamkos probably slots into Forsberg's spot because it is Stamkos's spot. Like it has been his spot for many years. He's been the guy in the league that's shot from those hash marks. So I think Forsberg is probably getting moved. So we'll see how that affects him. But overall, I think this means only good things for Nashville. And I really like the outlook for Steven Stamkos. I think, Blake, you've been talking a lot this offseason on your pods about the mental aspect of things. I think this past year for Stamkos, there was probably some mental anguish going on there. We saw him in training camp last year come out and say that Brisebois didn't even talk to him in the offseason about an extension. And that was kind of just a story all year long. And then in the end, didn't work out. And it sounds like based on his interview today that they just were done. They didn't want him back. So I think he's in a place that wants him. He's in a place where he can be one of the guys again. And I think you're going to see Stamkos have a really nice year.
What do you think about that, Blake? Talk to me about this. Talk to me about how you see that power play lining up. Like, is Nyquist just SOL now? He's just out of there, and it's just Marchessault, or do you think that he still works in there? Because, like, obviously they had tremendous chemistry last year. Have to imagine Ryan O'Reilly still centering that unit just for face-off purposes alone. But talk to me about how you see the top power play going there, and what you think this team might be able to do there.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and obviously we're gonna have to wait and see. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, Josi, Stamkos, and then to me, it's a choice between Marchessault or Nyquist. And I don't think it's just cut and dry. Like, yeah, they signed Marchessault, and that's a really nice signing, and this guy's great, but it's not like he's a great power play performer. You know, like he's very good. Obviously, he's a shot monster. I love that. But I mean, Nyquist has tenure here. He's proven he can do it. He got 24 power play points himself last year. So I think that, you know, it's not just an easy decision there to say Nyquist is out of there, and it could equal value for Nyquist if, you know, we do find out like, oh yeah, he's getting it and Marchessault's getting pushed down. I think that would maybe be how it goes. But I guess if I had to go with my gut, I'd probably say Marchessault starts on power play 1 just to see what we've got there. But in terms of Stamkos too, like, I'm a little bit more lukewarm on Stamkos there. I feel like a lot of Stamkos's value, obviously a huge amount, was his exposure and to the power play, to Tampa Bay's power play, and his obviously contribution there. But this is a guy who's getting well over 30 power play points every year, and now he's going to a new team with a new power play. And he's, like you said, Josh, he's gonna move Forsberg over. Like, I agree with you. I think you got to have Stamkos there. That's his spot. Right. So what does Forsberg do? So now the power play looks a little different. I'm sure they'll figure it out, but you know, it's just going to be some growing pains there. And I think we're going to see less production on the power play from Stamkos. And then if you dig into his even strength numbers, like, there's not a lot going on there. You know what I mean? He's good enough, but he's slowing down, right? This guy's like maybe Ovechkin, you know, 3 years ago or something, right? Like, he's a half rink all-star. He just gets in there, set up, bang. Like, he's all about that. He's not rushing it in. He's not doing that stuff. He needs guys to do that for him, right? So I'm a little bit lukewarm there. That said, point per game player, I think we should expect from Stamkos again, maybe another season like this. What do you guys think about Tommy Novak going into the season here? Because he's probably going to get that plum deployment, which I think will probably be the second line, Stamkos, Marchessault, and then Novak centering it. Do you think he has some value going into the season here?
Yeah, I think he definitely is worth a look. I mean, I don't think he's going to get drafted on draft day, but it's definitely a player that you're going to have some interest in. A player that they already gave 3.5 million to. It's kind of weird because you think of him as like a super young player. He's 27 years old. He's not
Yep.
the youngest guy in the world, but I do think that he's a capable playmaker. And like if they keep the top line intact from last year, then it's Stamkos and Marchessault on either side of Novak, and like at even strength, that's a pretty nice
Yeesh.
spot to be. So I do think that Novak could at least have streamer value next year, if not much else. I do think that Brady Shea, like his value probably decreases overall here in Carolina. They just spread things out so much that he had lots of 5v5 value, and then they also at times went a little bit more 1A 1B with the power play, and Shea got some more value out of that. Behind Yossi, like he's not seeing the ice on the power play, so yeah, I think it's a little bit down for Brady Shea in terms of his fantasy value, but I do think that overall you got to get excited about what this team could potentially be offensively. Jack says, I'm planning to have at least one of Stamkos, Forsberg, Marchessault, or Yossi on all my teams next year. Nashville's going to put up a lot of goals with Burnett pulling the streams. Yeah, hard to disagree with that. Elomate says, love your podcast. Cheers.
Hello,
great
mate.
host." Thank you.
Hello,
Aman
governor.
says, go here first. Is Carolina better than last year? Will Ghost be on power play 1? Happy Canada Day. Happy Canada Day to you. I do think that Ghost is on top power play. It seems like they're kind of done with Brent Burns. They've tried everything else now. I think, yeah, same thing I said about Detroit last year when they got Gostisbehere. You go out and you get Shane Gostisbehere, you only get Shane Gostisbehere for one purpose, and that's to run your top power play unit. So that would be my expectation. It says, meanwhile, this whole tax haven stateside nonsense is driving me crazy. Poor Jets got decimated. Yeah, that is the state of affairs for the team.
What happened to our boys?
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. Jackson asks, what line do you expect Jeff Skinner to be on? No power play 1. What's his ceiling look like now? Yeah, we talked about it a little bit before, but I do think that 30-plus goals is well within the realm of possibilities for Jeff Skinner without power play 1. Even, yeah, like he's got that contingent upside too, right? Like you have to think he's probably next guy up for power play 1 if there's an injury. Just given his track record of goal scoring in the league, that would be my baseline expectation.
I'm taking the under.
I
The under on 30 goals for Jeff Skinner.
Yeah, I think that's poor form, Blake. I think
Oh,
you need to put some
God.
respect on this man's name.
Oh no, he needs to play some defense. All right, I don't think. Yeah, I mean, I think Arvidsson's going to be the next man up there in Edmonton. That's my thought right off the bat. Like if someone
Do you
goes
guys-
down,
Do you guys think Jeff Jackson listens to Apples and Genos? Because signing Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson, that's very much what I think all of us would have done if we were.
yeah,
in
I
his
love it.
spot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he got rid of Fogel, so I don't know if I like that.
That's true. You can never get rid of McLovin if you listen to
No.
us. All right. Jack says, okay, you guys talked me out of Stamkos. Like the shout out for Novak. Jackson says, Forsberg's value go up, down, stay about the same. Now that he has a lot more help. Power play 1 will look nice, but will Stamkos take away his production? Yeah, we talked a little bit about that. Overall, I think his value in drafts anyway probably goes up. Do I think that he's going to have a better season than last year? No. Yeah, probably ran a little bit hot last year and will probably regress some even with the guys helping out there. Does provide some insulation for the floor. Like, if O'Reilly and Nyquist had gotten injured last year, like Forsberg would have been really without anybody to help him out. Now he's got a little bit more insulation in that regard. And so that probably raises the floor, but I don't think the ceiling really raises for Forsberg in my mind. Jason said, just saying, I feel Stammer goes for tons this year. What's to prove that Tampa shouldn't have let him go? Yeah, it's a fair point. But yeah, like Josh said, it really did seem like Breezeball was just over it from the
He was
start.
eating
Like,
his sandwich. He went to his
was-
house. He took the sandwich out of his mouth. He said, "Give me that Stamkos." Get the hell out of my sight.
JV says Edmonton winning the cup next year. Mark my words. Hard to bet against it, given the scoring talent and just given the McDavid factor. Although I do think that Edmonton is one of the worst supporting casts to ever make the finals. They just happen to have Connor McDavid single-handedly willing them there. That was an interesting run to watch, and yeah, Just a really impressive performance in my book. All right, we got to keep moving or we'll never get through it all. But the Seattle Kraken have agreed to terms with defenseman Brandon Montour on a 7-year contract at $7.14 million AAV. My take here is that you don't sign Brandon Montour unless you want him to run the top power play. That's easily his best attribute. He's a puck rushing offensive defenseman. Can eat a ton of minutes, but he's definitely an offense-minded guy. So if you're acquiring him, that's what you're expecting him to do. I think that's my expectation. I think that Vince Dunn could still steal some of that. Hackstall did run a top power play, or not Hackstall. I'm still on Hackstall. Bilesma did run a more like true top power play unit, not a 1A, 1B situation. That would be my expectation for Seattle next year, is that they do run a bit more of a true number one power play. And so that would be good for Montour and bad for Dunn in my estimation. Josh, you got any pushback on that?
No pushback at all. I think they would be smart to put Brandon Montour quarterbacking that top power play, and smart to load up. I know I tweeted about this earlier today. Like, if you're getting Montour, you've got to play him on your power play. I'm more interested in talking about the other signing that they made today, the Seattle Kraken, Chandler Stevenson, signing him for 7 years, $6+ million. This is by far the worst contract signed today. It's got to be. Am I wrong?
What do you think, Blake?
No, I mean, it's up there, right? It's one of the worst. Like, I don't understand the thinking here. Obviously, like, these are the professionals, like the people making these decisions. We're just three guys, in our basements, like crunching the numbers. But, like, what is this? Like, what was it? 6.75, and there was term.
6.25. Yeah.
Okay.
6.25, 7 years.
This is a guy that, like, first off, shots on goal per 60 at 5-on-5 last year, 3.86. Huh? Buddy, what are you doing? What in the haberdashery and hemoglobin is going on? I don't understand. Individual
Those are Casey Middlestat numbers.
Yeah, no, Middlestat is better. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, Josh. So, yeah, I mean, this guy lives off efficiency and huge deployment in Vegas. Now he's going to a new team. What the hell's his role? Like, I'm not even sure where he's going to play. Like, he's mostly a center. So does McCann play wing? Like, Chandler can play left wing as well. So does he play with Beniers and Eberle? Like, either way, I'm out. You know what I mean? Like, and for fantasy, like, he's going on the stream team like this. Oh, Seattle has a good schedule this week. Is Chandler Stevenson available? Yeah, he's way down there. All right. Yep. I'm going to pick him up. But yeah, I just think there's such a question mark there too with the new coach. Like, we don't know what's going on. So I think best case scenario for Stevenson, 55 points, maybe. Like,
yeah.
Ew. I mean, that's basically what he had this past year. I believe my thing with this is, it hampers you long-term. They have such a good pipeline of prospects, Seattle does. You've got Shane Wright coming in this year, likely. I mean, I would hope playing full-time in Seattle. You have so much center depth. And they're also young, Matty Beniers. And like, what are you doing? And now you're bringing this guy in for like in like a basically untradeable contract. Like, for 7 years, you're gonna have to pay Shane Wright, you're gonna have to pay Matty Beniers. Like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do when you have to pay these guys? Like,
what you gonna do? That's what I'm hearing Hulk Hogan there. I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I do think this is a pretty atrocious contract. We talked about Chicago, like, just not spending everything. Like, Seattle was the exact opposite. They're like, oh, we have this money, let's go throw it at all these guys. I like Montour, but yeah, like, it's still a huge deal for a guy who just turned 30. And then yeah, Stevenson, I don't think is gonna live up to that number in the first year or the 7th year of that contract. So that's going to be a tough one. He's instantly their highest paid forward. Their two highest paid forwards were Andre Burakovsky and Jaden Schwartz at $5.5 million. So
as they should be.
Yeah, definitely. Those guys have been absolute studs for them over the last couple of years. Yeah, I tend to agree. Like, I feel like they probably could have used another center, but more of a depth guy. Like, you want Beniers to be the one. You want Shane Wright to come in and be a part of the middle six and see what he can do. You want obviously Yenny Gord to continue what he's been doing for the last number of years in kind of a middle six situation there, playing in all situations. But yeah, it really did not feel to me like Chandler Stevenson should have been the target there for the Seattle Kraken.
It's wild stuff.
Future Gadget Lab says, outside of Stevenson, who's the biggest fade rise in your draft boards from the guys moving? That's an interesting one. I don't really know off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I'd have to think that one through a little bit more. Do either of you guys have any that jump off the board to you as of today?
I mean, I know we're probably going to talk about it, but I hate Chychrun to Washington there. That pisses me off.
Oh, yeah.
Because, we're just not going to see him on power play 1. And what the hell? Like, obviously a guy that's needed. Also, Washington's just pissing me off in general. Logan Thompson there as well. Like, now we don't get Charlie Lindgren at value. It just muddies things up for fantasy. So those are two right off the bat that I'm thinking about. But, I mean, those were trades. So I don't know in terms of these free agents. Josh, you got anybody?
I think my biggest rise is probably Sergachev, but I guess that was a trade as well. Maybe, do you want to talk about him now? I know we're kind of skipping ahead, but Jake DeBrusk to Vancouver. I really like that a lot. I could see him being the fourth guy on the top power play there, taking Lindholm's spot. And I think he's going to get primo deployment on the wing there. And I think DeBrusk is going to pop this year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one that I'm pretty interested in. I think that could be a really good situation for him. They're going to need him maybe a little bit more than Boston has in the past, where he's been buried a little bit behind both Marchand and Pasternak. I think they got room maybe in Vancouver, and I think it's a little bit more of an offensive minded environment where he's going to probably be told to go get it a little bit more. So I'm actually pretty interested in that one. We do have a slide for him coming up. Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Let's talk about Chychrun a second longer, because I do think that's an interesting one. It's just brutal. The trade was brutal. Like, the Senators got absolutely fleeced. Like, Nick Jensen and a 3rd round pick for a guy who's like consistently just been like incredible in all the metrics that we like to look at here. I honestly wouldn't even care if he didn't know how to play defense, given how good his offensive metrics look. But yeah, they just decided that they wanted to be out on him at a reasonable price for another year, just because, I guess. Like, is he like the worst person? Like, as a person, is he just like the absolute worst? And they're like, I actually can't stand having you in the building. You need to leave now. Like, is that what's going on with Jacob Chychrun?
He seems like a beauty to me.
I know. I don't understand it. Okay, this is my gripe with this situation is and I have to make it about the Leafs, but you sign OEL. You sign OEL for 4 years, 3.5. Could you not, like, there was
Are you kicking tires?
Little, like, how, they always talk about how Brad Treliving is in on everything. How the fuck was he not in on this? It doesn't make any sense. Like, Chychrun is a better defenseman than OEL at this point, and he's younger. Sure. He's making $4-something million, like just a hair above what OEL is making. And that is a guy who I could see playing power play 1 over Morgan Riley if that's something that they feel like they need to do. So how is that not a consideration there? That's insane.
Yeah. Maybe Ottawa doesn't pick up the phone because they're in division.
Maybe
but
that's
kind of the only excuse that I can offer Brad on that regard. I know, Blake, you got to get running pretty soon, but let's try to get through as many more before we lose you. Josh and I will keep soldiering on because we got nothing better to do than talk about fantasy hockey on Monday night in July. This is Arvidsson. So go off, Blake. This is your guy. Tell me why Victor Arvidsson is going to be better than Jeff Skinner this year.
Tell me why. Oh, God, Joshy, where were you, buddy? Come on, man. I needed you on that one to get the guitar. I just think that we've already seen this show from Arvidsson, right? His situation isn't changing that much. He didn't get power play 1 for a lot of his time in LA. In fact, his big season there in 2022, he only had a 44% power play share, and he got 25 power play points, right? So he's not going to get power play yeah, he's going to be on power play too. So all of that goes away, but he's also really good at even strength, right? This guy's a shot monster, a chance monster. He does all those things that we love here at Apples and Genos. And now he's got access to Draisaitl most likely, right? It's going to be a freaking wagon at even strength. Like, you know, and like I was saying before, I think of these two, Skinner and Arvidsson knows how to play defense. I think he's going to endear himself better to the coach. I think that in terms of power play, he's, you know, could be argued just as good of a power play performer as Jeff Skinner. I think Skinner's kind of, I could see Jeff Skinner kind of going down this year, similar to what he did in Buffalo, like getting the 12-minute treatment. That's why I'm like, I don't see 30 goals for Jeff Skinner. I feel like that might be what happens here. I just don't see his pathway to minutes, but Arvidsson, I do see a pathway to minutes because he does more than just shoot and score. Like he plays in all three zones. Right. So, that's my take on Arvidsson. I think, you know, we're probably looking at, again, at like a 50 to 55 point player. He's definitely capped because he doesn't get on the power play. And then for Skinner, yeah, I think, you know, it might be even stinkier, like a 40-point season for Jeff Skinner. That's kind of where I'm at with that. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. Guys, what do you think? Help me out.
I think it's a bit of a hot take. Arvidsson has one season in the NHL where he had more than 9 power play points. So I'm not sure that just because he had one good year with LA that he's necessarily the top secondary choice or contingent choice for power play 1 in Edmonton. I think Jeff Skinner's just been more reliable year after year, both in terms of just availability, because Arvidsson's obviously dealt with injury a fair bit. But yeah, I think that Skinner's just the guy that I think is going to show up and he's going to generate chances. Is he going to play defense? No, but you knew that about him when you signed him for $3 million. So, yeah, that's my take. I like Skinner a little bit more for fantasy this year.
Wrong. Josh, back me up.
It's a toss up. It's a toss up.
Running right down the middle on
there
that
you go.
one.
That's fun. Yeah.
Future Gadget Lab, sorry, has nothing to do with today's move, but if Mr. Cream Wrestling, please tell me I was smart to reject his offer of hints for Why Joe in our Cats Dynasty League. Blake, you want to address this?
Why Joe? Oh, yeah. Reject my offer. What was it?
Wyatt Johnson? You're making offers for Wyatt Johnson?
I was trying. I was ready to get rid of the farm. I'm like, you know, I'm rebuilding. Like, give me Wyatt Johnston. I love that player. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not that high on hints. Really moving forward, I think because of the
Baby Dry.
Yeah, I feel like Baby Dry is kind of capped out, and we know what he is. That said, he's amazing at what he does. And like, I think he's probably a 60 to 70 point guy year after year, but I don't know that he has much higher ceiling there. I do think Wyatt Johnston, you know, maybe in a couple of years is going to have a higher ceiling than 70 points. So I was trying my best. This man just rebuffed me, just left me on red for, you know, a couple of weeks and then just decided to just decline it. So buddy, thank you for your service. You made a good choice. Keep Wyatt Johnston. That's the right thing.
All right. JV says Skinner has a great shot too. That would pair nicely with Draisaitl. Yeah, tend to agree with that. Let's keep rolling. Sean Monahan, 5-year, $5.5 million deal with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Blake, before you go, Boone Jenner, is he still line 1 or is Monahan taking that to reestablish some chemistry with his guy, Johnny Gaudreau?
I don't know, man. I hate to hear this, but I think, yeah, you bring in Monahan, like it's for that Gaudreau connection, right? I think they'll definitely give it a shot. So what does that mean? Boone Jenner on the third line. Oh God, I hate to see this, but that seems like a reasonable place for Boone Jenner, to be honest. Like he's a depth guy. Like, you know, I love the man, but it's because they had no one else. They had to put him out there for 20 minutes a night. You know, Sean Monahan is going to eat into Boone Jenner's time and fantasy value, I think. But I also read something about Sean Monahan, just a quote that he said is that he feels better than he's ever felt going into the season. So I don't know. I put a little bit of stock into that. Like this guy had a really nice resurgence on a crappy team in Montreal, played decent in Winnipeg. And then this is a nice landing spot for him. I think, you know, it's the same thing year after year with Columbus. Like, I think we're in on Columbus again, guys. Like, let's hope that, you know, nobody gets injured, you know, for the millionth time. But yeah, in terms of fantasy though, for Sean Monahan, that's kind of where I'll leave it. You know what I mean? I'm not really picking this guy up because he has access to Johnny Gaudreau. Like, no, Lots of guys had access to Johnny Gaudreau last year and didn't do jack squat. So that said, I do like Johnny Gaudreau for a bounce back as well. But yeah, come on, just put Boone Jenner up on the top line and do the right thing. You know what I mean? That makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that Monahan probably gets a look at that spot, like especially because it's not like he's coming into a spot where Boone Jenner and Johnny Gaudreau had like this crazy chemistry last year and everything was just roses, right? So there's probably an element of that there, probably an element of them still, I guess, trying to potentially shelter Adam Fantilli a little bit more. He didn't get in a full rookie season due to injury. A little bit disappointing for me because I honestly think that Adam Fantilli is a guy that I'd be super excited about as a potential breakout candidate to a massive level. So that's a little bit disappointing for me. I'm still going to be interested in Fantilli. I'm going to be watching his deployment really closely. He could still be on the top power play depending what they want to do there. I think Columbus just really needs to get some stability at coach and get these guys playing
that's supposed
playing
to be happening
hockey
soon.
again.
Like I read that they're trying to do that within the week or something like that. So, and I heard McClellan's name bumped around there. That would be pretty damn nice, I got to say, just because of the structure and the defense that he's kind of brings. Like that could bring some validity to this team for once.
Absolutely. All right, Blake, I know you got to go. Thanks for joining. We will talk to you soon again, and Hutch and I will soldier on here. And we'll talk about DeBrusk, talk about Vancouver, just as Blake says goodbye, because what could be more apt? I do like this. I know you said your piece a little bit already, Josh, but I really do like this spot for Jake DeBrusk. I think he fits with just about anybody there. I think that he could fit on the top line if they want to play him left wing with Miller and Besser. Like, I think that could work out. That'd be an interesting element. That'd be a heavy top line. I think that they also got Danton Heinen, who I kind of like as a middle six kind of floater. He could get up there and give us some weeks. I really just think these two acquisitions really solidify the top nine there for Vancouver, and I think that Jake DeBrusk really could be in for one of the best seasons of his career if everything works out kind of perfectly. I do think that they have an opening on the top power play unit that could be his. Connor Garland got some run there, but if everything works out the way that I think they want it to, I think Jake DeBrusk turns into that guy on the top power play unit. And it would absolutely reap some benefits playing alongside the studs that they have there in Vancouver. All right, I want to keep rolling. We're getting along. Obviously, we got lots of people in here still, so they're still enjoying it. But Gostisbehere 3-year deal to the Canes. We're getting a little bit into the dregs now. We got past the most exciting signings for sure. But Gostisbehere to the Canes, 3-year deal. Like I said, I think if you sign Shane Gostisbehere, you know exactly what you're doing. You want Shane Gostisbehere to run your top power play. You got anything more to say about that, Hutch? How much do you think, like, is he like just third pair top power play, or is he more than that, do you think?
I think he probably is third pair top power play. I mean, obviously they lost a couple defensemen, so maybe he does play a little bit higher in the lineup. They lost Shea and Pesce, so their depth isn't as strong. But I think, like you said, he's definitely going to play top power play. I said that about Tony DeAngelo last year, and honestly, in the beginning, that I think that is what they got him to do. It just didn't work out in the end, and he was too much of a liability on the back end at 5v5 to really keep in the lineup, and didn't move the needle enough on power play 1 to really warrant having him there. Shane Gostisbehere is completely different. Like, he obviously is not the best defensively, but he is incredible on the power play. He's had a couple just absolute banger years in Detroit and in Arizona, where honestly he didn't even have top power play exclusively. So imagine him on a power play exclusively, right? Like playing a full season on a top power play. I see this being huge for Gostisbehere. He's going to be a bit of a, I mean, he never gets respected in drafts, so I'm going to be looking for him in late rounds.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think that Carolina just generates offense. Gostisbehere going to be a part of it. I think he's probably going to run around that like 50 to 60% rostered for most of the year. He's going to be always like, oh, should I drop this guy? Should I not? Like, it's not a guy I'm going to be excited to click on necessarily, but definitely an option for like your fourth D, especially you got like power play points in your Cats League and you're looking for a fourth D. You've already got your bangs figured out. Gossip Bear makes some sense there. Future Gadget Lab, Boone Jenner, my multi-cat king, say it ain't so. Yeah, I do think, unfortunately, it might not be Boone season next year. Banksy asked, did y'all touch on Duchesne and Dallas now that Pavs is gone? We could do that for a second here. Duchesne, 1 year, $3 million to stay in Dallas. Kind of curious why he didn't try for more. He had a good year. Felt like he reestablished some value. Obviously, he wanted to be back in Dallas. Maybe they said, like, sorry, like, the best we can do is 1 year. And he was like, I'll take it. Maybe that's what it was. But my take here, and you tell me what yours is, Josh, but my take is that Wyatt Johnston is that dude, and Duchesne is still basically exactly what he was last year. I don't think Duchesne changes much. I actually think he might have run a little bit hot last year. He's kind of had like an up year followed by a down year, followed by an up year, followed by a down year, just kind of ridden the wave every single year for like the past 5 or something like that. So I feel like it could be a down year for Duchesne. What's your take on him there?
I 100% agree with that. I think Wyatt Johnston's the guy to play on that top power play, and probably top line with Hinson and Robertson, if you call that the top line. So I think, I mean, they gave us a little bit of a taste of that last year for a bit, moving Pavelski down the lineup and putting Johnston right up top. So I think that. I don't see Duchesne as being a guy that you need to have on your roster in redraft leagues. He's going to be another streamer season for him, and when he gets hot, you hang on. But I don't see I don't see him really moving the needle too much.
All right, let's keep rolling. Tyler Toffoli. It's an interesting one. It's hard to get excited about the landing spot, but as I mentioned, I do have a little bit of interest in the Sharks being a little bit fun next year. 4 years, $6 million AAV for Toffoli there. What's your expectation? Do you think that, do you agree with me there that, we might actually have something in San Jose? Like, it feels like there's even a few outs to this being like at least a good power play unit. I'm just a little bit excited about what we could get out of fantasy. We might have some relevance once again in San Jose.
I agree, man. Like, I mean, obviously, like, I'm not going to get too ahead of myself, but they've made some really nice moves. They picked up Ty Dellandrea. I don't know if we talked about that before, but he's going to get a bit more of an opportunity there from Dallas. He's a guy that would struggle to get into the lineup, but I think is better than his production shows, at least in terms of counting stats. And then they made a ton of nice little moves. Then you've got a much better top six. You've got Celebrini coming in, you've got Will Smith coming in, you've got Thomas Bordeleau that's probably going to play full time with them. He looked pretty good. And then obviously William Eklund, Fabian Zetterlund had a great run with them last year for a bit, and then Michael Granlund had an awesome year, and ended up being a hold for a good section of the year in fantasy. So I don't hate it. Like, I mean, I could see Toffoli being a 60-point guy. Like, I don't think that he's gonna come close to his numbers in Calgary, but I mean, I don't really see his production taking that much of a dip.
Yep. I think that's all fair points on Toffoli. I'm trying to suss out what this power play might look like. Like, I think that Granlund probably takes the tough minutes and they let Celebrini kind of come in as more of a 2C. Probably a fair amount of minutes, but probably not like 20 plus. So I think that will be interesting to see how they do that. Zetterlund has shown that he can eat minutes. I think Eklund, we've heard some people say that Eklund could take a step this year, especially with some more talent around him. I think that's definitely possible. Will Smith probably coming in as well alongside Celebrini into the league this year. High talent player, high draft pedigree there. I really do think that there's a few ways that this could really break right for San Jose, at least in terms of offensive production. Their defense is still putrid. Like, that is definitely going to drag the team down to some extent. And the goaltenders are Mackenzie Blackwood and Vitek Vanacek, which is still a little bit scary year to year. But
Yeah, they're
I
still trying to tank, but they're trying to have fun now at the very
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. They're not going for they got their Celebrini. They don't need another one. They're trying to do a little bit of something at least. And yeah, Toffoli could be a part of that. I do think that he's got 30 goal upside. Maybe I'll see where projections take him out to, but I'll probably be projecting him a little bit lower, more like 25, 50. But he definitely has more upside than you would think just going to San Jose. He could be like completely written off in your drafts next year, and I think that'd be a mistake. So I do think that there's something there for sure. All right. Next up was Skinner. I think we've just from the
We've pretty
comments
much
so
covered
far, we've
Skinner.
pretty much covered Jeff Skinner at this point. Cam Talbot 2-year deal in Detroit. Do you think that Talbot is the starter in Detroit now? They also signed Jack Campbell for a
Yeah.
1-year like men deal, but I feel like Talbot's got to be the guy, right?
I have no idea. There's got to be a move coming, right? Because they've got four NHL goalies on their roster. They've got Alex Lyon, who spent most of the year as their starter, and then they still got Ville Husso. Like, what are they doing with that guy? So there's got to be some sort of deal coming here. I have no idea what they're doing, to be honest. I imagine Jack Campbell is probably their third guy. They brought him in to kind of be like potentially an AHL guy or like a third goalie, a third option, and kind of like a hype man. He's a really good hype man, as we've seen. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I genuinely don't know what they're doing here in Detroit. I think there's got to be something else coming here.
Yeah, I think Campbell's just depth probably. Yeah, Husso versus Lyon. Really not sure what they're doing. They obviously gave some money to Husso, free agency, 2 free agencies ago now. Is that right? Yeah. It's a weird spot, but I do feel like if you're going after Cam Talbot, like I don't know, it doesn't feel like a backup deal. Like 2.5 mil. Seems like most of the
Fair
backups
enough.
went for less than that. Like at least he's getting a 1B deal here. Yeah, I can't say I'm like too excited about it either way. Like the Red Wings goalies haven't given us a whole lot. Lyon had a hot stretch last year, a few good weeks where he was pretty good, but overall, I don't think Detroit really got better this year. Maybe some of their kids step up, and that's the way they get better this year. Marco Casper comes in, Simon Edvinsson maybe comes in, and that helps out the team, but it doesn't seem like they got better in free agency necessarily. So, interesting situation. Don't think I'm going to be super excited about the goaltenders, but we could, we look at the Coyotes last year, right? And Connor Ingram comes out of nowhere, provides value. You got Decord out of Seattle, not a team that a lot of people were looking at as super exciting. You can definitely get some goaltender value out of these situations. So definitely want to keep an eye on what the Red Wings do over the rest of the offseason in goal. Duclair, we talked about a little bit. I do think that like they gave him 4 years, like it's something. Duclair has been bouncing around on 1-year deals a little bit, year to year, but it seems like the Islanders wanted to, make him at home here, make him definitely a part of the top 6 with the AAV they're giving him there. What's your take on Duclair's top? Like, what's his absolute top end potential? Do you think like if everything goes right for him, if he has perfect chemistry with Barzal, like is a 70-point season possible for Anthony Duclair?
I think he's probably closer to 60 for his ceiling. That would be my feeling. I don't think he's really shown that he could get anywhere close to 70. And I'm not sure that Barzal really is a good enough play driver. Obviously, I think Barzal is a fantastic player, but I don't know that he's going to be the guy to bring Duclair to 70 points. But I mean, right. I could be wrong about that, but I would say 60 points is probably Duclair's ceiling. But I do like this spot for him, though. I don't get me wrong. I like this pickup for the Islanders.
Yeah, I do think that Barzal could be kind of the right fit for him just stylistically, and that could be interesting. It could be, I don't know, like you can conclusively say like it's better than the Lightning, but if he can get on a top power play and on a line with Barzal, then that could definitely be the best like situation that he's had for any length of time. So that'll be interesting for sure. He just kind of only occasionally got power play one time in Tampa there. So definitely be interested to see if he can hold down a more continuous spot on a top power play here in the island. Slavkovsky, big deal. Oh man, This is a monster. It's an 8-year deal, $60.8 million. Yeah. What do you think about Slavkovsky? So we had a great half of the season. He had a terrible first half, a terrific second half, and he, yeah, like legitimately looked like a star under the hood. Like things were looking good. He looked like a star in the making. Definitely ran hot. He ran excessively hot for sure towards the back half of the season, but also like started to do the things that you need to do to continue to grow as a player and to score lots of points moving forward. Still like extremely young, like 20 years old, right? So do you think that Slavkovsky will live up to this deal? Do you think that this is, the top line, top power play locked in? Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky, these are the guys. The Habs, obviously, they got Ivan Demidov in the draft, who a lot of people are super high on as an offensive talent. I'm going to talk to Victor Nuno this week about fallout from the draft, and we'll have that pod up later. But definitely, I think that what they're saying with this amount of money that they're giving to this player is that this is a guy who's going to play a ton of minutes and is going to be a top of the lineup player for us for years and years.
Yeah, I think, Ken Hughes has done this already a few times with his young guys, is sign them right before it seems like they're going to break out to something that seems like a ridiculous deal at the time for the production that they've shown already, but in the future it's probably going to end up being like an absolute steal. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see that with Slavkovsky. I mean, we've talked about it on the show and behind the scenes that it seems like he's a guy that's probably going to really pop this year. There's a lot of things under the hood that look really, really nice for Slavkovsky. So I think that he's a guy that with the minutes, with the right deployment, which it seems like he's going to get at this point, he will probably live up to this deal, and definitely by the end of it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Overall, I just think that like even if Demidov is that dude, like they're gonna find a way to make it work with all the top end guys
Yeah.
there. They're all gonna be on the top power play. Like I'm just like not super worried that Slavkovsky is gonna be like super demoted down the lineup or something like that. Yeah, overall I think it's probably a deal that's gonna look pretty good for a guy to put up the second half that he did, like sustained under the hood numbers. Yes, he ran hot, but good numbers under the hood for a long period of time. I think that Slavkovsky's future is pretty bright at this point. We talked about Duchesne already, so we won't go back in on that one, but definitely a good deal for Dallas. Hard to hate on that. Eric Gustafsson, this is one that I'm pretty interested in, actually. The Red Wings signed Gustafsson, 2-year deal, $2 million. This guy actually kind of crushes third pairing minutes. Honestly, kind of wish that the Leafs had kept him when the Leafs had him. Instead, we went the Klingberg route, and we all know how that went. But I think that Gustafsson, it's hard to watch Shane Gostisbehere go out the door and Eric Gustafsson come in the door on the same day and not just draw that instant parallel that this is the guy going to the top power play. Just because he's done that, like he's been super effective. When Carlson had the injury in Washington and Gustafsson was there, Gustafsson stepped in. He was a fantasy revelation for as long as Carlson was out. What's your take on Gustafsson here? Do you think that he takes over the top power play, or do you think that they try to make Mo Seider into that like true number one defenseman who does all things? Like, do you think that's where the Red Wings are headed with Seider? I think it's more of a Seider question than it is a Gustafsson question in the end.
Right. I think this is the one part of the Yzer plan that seems to be transparent, and that's that they don't want Seider on the top power play. It's been pretty clear for a few years now, and just the fact that they let Gostisbehere go, obviously they probably would have had to give him a raise, and they bring in a cheaper option in Gustafsson, and who does almost exactly the same thing. So I think you're 100% right. I think this guy is probably going to take top power play, and that's going to be really nice for his fantasy value. I think he's going to be a guy that you can definitely roster, and a guy that you could probably get late in drafts because people aren't going to pay attention for the most part.
Yeah, definitely a guy that's going to be on a lot of sleeper lists come September. That's for sure. All right, we got through what I would consider the major signings for fantasy anyway. Any of this list really sticking out to you, Hutch, that we want to talk to? We had Matt Roy, a big deal to Washington, but not necessarily a big time fantasy contributor. Maybe in your Cats leagues or in your deep leagues, he's providing some peripherals and he's getting shots and stuff like that. So he does provide you something there, but I don't think this is a guy that's going to really move the needle for fantasy. David Perron goes to Ottawa. Jason Zucker goes to Buffalo. That's what I'm kind of interested in personally, because you see Jeff Skinner go out and you could draw a quick parallel to Jason Zucker coming in and maybe he fits into that role. But at the same time, I do feel like JJ Paterka really kind of staked his claim at the end of last year. And so I feel like you got a Paterka, Thompson, Tuck top line in the making here. And then Dahlin, obviously, on the back end. Who do you think is the fourth member of that power play? Is it Dylan Cousins now, or could Jason Zucker challenge for that?
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I would hope that it's Dylan Cousins. I think Zucker could hold down that spot, but yeah, they kind of cycled things around last year. It'll be interesting to see now that they have. I mean, now that they don't have Don Granato anymore. Lindy Ruff, Lindy Ruff kind of flipped his power play around too in New Jersey. I mean, part of that was because of injury. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I saw this Jason Zucker signing and it didn't really I don't know. It didn't really move the needle for me that much, but I don't know. I could see him being there. I just feel like there's so much young talent on Buffalo. Like, I don't know how he doesn't get buried in the mix. The Future Gadget Lab says Zach Benson season. That's a guy that's there. You've got Yuri Kulich that could make a jump this year. And like you said, JJ Paterka, you've got Jack Quinn. Jack Quinn could be a power play guy. Like I could honestly see him being the fourth forward on that power play. So I think they have so many options. I just don't know that Jason Zucker, I honestly personally probably see him being a third line winger on that team, maybe power play 2.
Fair enough. Anybody else from the list sticking out to you? For me, I think that, I mean, we got to talk about McLovin going to LA, but I do think like LA is pretty clearly shown that they just want to be like this cycle the lines team. I think with Kopitar aging, like that probably just kind of continues even more, where they're just going to cycle their top 9. They want to have a top 9 they feel really good about, and Fogle just kind of fits into that. So he could have, like, I'm not saying he couldn't have like a Trevor Moore year like Moore did this past year. Like that could happen for Fogle, but he's never been an efficient shooter. So it would really have to be an outlier season like that for him to really have more than just like a few weeks of streamer quality performances for us. Anybody else from the list up at the top sticking out there for you?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Ottawa, David Perron. I like his value, but there's so many forwards on that team. Like, I just don't know where he fits. Like, you'd think there's probably a move coming there for the Sens. Teravainen, I think is a guy that is interesting for sure. I look at him like I looked at guys like Andreas Athanasiou and players like that in the past in Chicago that could just get some type of exposure. We saw Kyle in the chat saying Teravainen with Bedard has a pulse on it at least. I think that's a guy to definitely look at. A lot of these other guys I don't think have a ton of fantasy relevance. I look at Anthony Mantha that depending on where he plays in the lineup could have some value in Calgary, but because they just don't have as much offensive depth. But they're similar to Buffalo, where I feel like there's a lot of young talent that's going to kind of take a step this year. So I'm not really sure where he fits there. And you mentioned Danton Heinen as a guy that could be potentially like a streamer level guy on Vancouver. And with their lack of wing depth, I think that he kind of, I mean, he could be all over the place. He's a really good utility guy, kind of like Alex Kerfoot was in Toronto back in the day, but actually like pretty good. So I don't mind him. I don't think that's a guy that you're going to hold on your roster, but he's a guy to definitely keep an eye on when the season starts. But other than that, like Alex Wenberg is not a fantasy guy. Like he doesn't
Yeah.
really do anything. I mean, the Toronto guys, Tanev, Ekman Larson, Stolars. I mean, Stolars is a 1B. Like Joseph Wall's the starter there. Tanev and Ekman Larson are really just. I mean, unless Ekman Larson does get some power play time, like then I could see him being relevant. Chris Tanev's just a block machine. That's really all he is there. He's obviously going to be huge for the Leafs. I think that's his presence and his defensive game and his puck moving skills. It's kind of exactly what the Leafs need. He's just old as fuck, and they signed him for 6 years for some stupid reason. So I don't really know there, but other than that, I think I think that's pretty much it for me in terms of fantasy relevance. I don't know. Do you have anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I saw just before I dive in again, but I saw like Frank Saravelli tweeted out like all this stuff about like cap circumvention after the Tanev contract was signed.
Yeah.
Like if they're planning to like Robidas Island him, which has been the theory that they're only gonna actually play him for like 2 or 3 years of that deal, and then he goes on LTIR mysteriously for the rest of it. And it was all just like Leafs fans in his comments being like, "Shut up, Frank." Like, trying to tell him, like, don't tell the league. I don't know if that's the plan or not, but definitely it seems suspect given a 34-year-old guy with a lot of injury history, giving him 6-year term at that kind of AAV. Stolars, I think I might be a little bit more into Stolars than you, just as a 1B at the very least. Like, I do think the way that Treliving has talked about Wall this offseason, they're like, yeah, we got to figure out, like, well, he got injured a few times. We got to get him on a good training program because when he's been awesome. It really does seem like the organization is super high on Joseph Wall. Moving forward, but I do think that Stolars, like, he could get some run at some point throughout the season, and at Toronto, like, I mean, we made Martin Jones a decent option at points last year.
Yeah, that's fair.
If he does get some run, Stolars is going to be plenty fantasy viable in my opinion. So, I think there's a few guys on this list that could be interesting. Anthony Mantha in Calgary, like, it's going to be gross, but I think we get some streamer weeks out of him if he can turn things around a little bit. He got enough money there that it looks like that's what they want him to do. I think that Sharon Govich deal looks a little bit bad over the course of it, but he could definitely have some years and definitely some weeks for fantasy purposes that are pretty decent. I like Teravainen to Chicago. I think he's going to have some relevance, at least when he's on the top power play. Definitely going to be streamer, if not more there. Future Gadget Labs says, Weber just got into the Hall of Fame, still getting paid. I don't want to hear about Tanev getting LTIR retired.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
But you will hear about it because it's the Leafs.
Yeah, that's for sure.
The way it works.
It is.
And staying on the Leafs, Nate, do you imagine a scenario where at the end of the season, going into the playoffs, you've got Matt Murray as your starting goaltender?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. Yeah, Matt Murray did come back on like a min deal. He's been so injured that he's been unable to play for the last 2 years, basically, at this point. But yeah, I mean, stranger things have happened, especially with goalies. I wouldn't rule it out. I'm just going to be in on whoever's getting starts in Toronto. I think that's the long and the short of it for me. This was a cap-friendly tweet from earlier today. After 8 hours of free agency, top 10 remaining UFAs. Pavelski, who I think everybody expects to retire. Tarasenko still out there. Adam Henrique actually just signed with Edmonton, re-signed with Edmonton, 2 years, $3 million. So they just continue to add to that winger depth. Arvidsson just getting pushed down the lineup, Blake. I don't know what to tell you. Daniel Sprong, James Van Riemsdyk, Tyler Johnson, Jack Roslovic, Cam Atkinson, Justin Schultz, Kevin Shattenkirk. Definitely all the big names, except with the possible exception of Vladimir Tarasenko, are off the board at this point. Do you think Tarasenko, like, obviously depending where he goes, but do you think he's still like a potential power play one, like 60+ point guy, like stick on your roster all season kind of guy, or do you think he's into the phase now where he's just a streamer?
Yeah, like you said, I think it depends on where he goes. I think
Yeah.
if he goes to a place that needs him on power play 1, then yeah, I think he probably I could see him being a guy that sticks on your roster. But if he's just playing 5v5 minutes, I don't think that he's productive enough at this point in his career to be a guy that you keep.
Let's send him to San Jose. Let's get this train rolling. I want San Jose to be the most fun team for fantasy this year.
Yes.
Are you with me, Hutch?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, on that note, that's going to be all that we've got for this episode. It was a beefer, almost got to the 2-hour mark, but hopefully it brought you some value. Helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, which is a terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band there for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. Happy Canada Day. Happy Free Agency Day. That's it, folks. Much love.